Greetings, geometry students. Today you'll be taking notes via video. If you take out your note packet after 9.1 day 1, you'll see a blank piece of paper in your notes that look like this. There'll be a heading similar to what we see here. Your responsibility today is to take notes, to check in with Mrs. Tacroni as I tell you to do a checkpoint, and then you'll have some homework time when you're finished, okay? So, your 2 warm-up questions. Again, you're responsible for writing these notes down. I will ask Ms. Tacroni to see your notes when you're done, and they should have everything I have down on the screen written down as well. And you'll earn 5 points for that. Okay, so your first job is to sketch a right triangle. And I'd like you to do Pythagorean theorem on this first picture, as well as the second picture. So go ahead and take a minute to sketch those in. Oops, that shouldn't have been a 4. It's supposed to be a 7. Okay, so we'll do these 2 together. Always recognize that we need to identify the C value, and the C is always opposite the right angle. All right, so in this case, we have the C value here. So we're going to do A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And as long as C goes on this side, it doesn't matter what order we put A and B in, because those are our legs. So 4 squared plus 3 squared equals X squared. And we get 16 plus 9 equals X squared. If I add those together, we get 25. And the square root of 25 is 5. And so we get a nice integer value. For most of this chapter moving forward, we'll try to keep our answers in radical form. And so it's a good idea to practice breaking those down. Okay? Okay, so on the next one, we will do the same formula, but this time 14 is my C value. So we're going to square 14 over here, and then the other legs get squared and added together. So 7 squared plus X squared equals 14 squared. So we'll get 49 plus X squared equals 196. And then we're going to isolate the X squared term by subtracting 49 on both sides. So X squared will equal 147. And I don't actually want you to type the square root in your calculator. Instead, what I want you to practice doing is radical form. And so what you want to look at is there's a list of perfect squares on the board. They go like 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, etc., etc. All right, so when you look at this value, we're trying to find the biggest perfect square. And usually if it's an odd number, I don't even check the even numbers. And so I'm kind of looking at these numbers, and because I've done a lot of these problems, I do know 49 divides in. If you didn't know that, you would just take your calculator and type in 147 divided by 49 and see if you get a whole number. And in this case, you do. And it does go in 3 times. If it didn't give you a whole number, then you would just keep trying the next biggest perfect square until you get something that divides in without a decimal. Okay, so we've got our perfect square, and then we can do 7 root 3, and we're done here. Okay, so what you're going to notice today is a lot of problems are going to ask, instead of having you solve for a side with Pythagorean theorem, we're going to try to figure out what kind of triangle that we have if we know all 3 sides. So let's just at 3, 4, 5 we just built. You don't have to redraw it yet. So this is what we started with. And it definitely 3 squared. Oops, I'm going to write it the other way. 5 squared is equal to 3 squared. You don't have to write this. 3 squared plus 4 squared. Okay? You don't have to write that. Okay, what I do want you to write in your notes is, let's see what happens if you make this side a little bit shorter. Okay, so let's just say go ahead and write this part down. Let's draw the side that's 3. And then if we're going to shorten that side just a little bit, notice what happens to the side that was 4. Okay, this angle right here had to kind of shrink in. So now you got an acute angle. Okay, so let's just say this was 4.5. All right, what I want us to do is always get in a habit. For today, you're going to be doing a lot of comparing numbers. So I'm going to have you pick the biggest side of that triangle right away and write it down. So 4.5 is the biggest side. What I want you to realize is if we try to do Pythagorean theorem, let's set it up like this. Let's say that's our c squared value. And let's put a squared and b squared on the other side. So let's do 3 squared plus 4 squared. And let's just put a big box in the middle because it doesn't look like these are going to equal each other anymore. All right, so if I type this in the calculator, we get 20.25. Just leave a box right here. And then 3 squared plus 4 squared was 25. All right, what I want you to notice is that this inequality is going to be a less than because we've got an acute triangle. So if you shorten that side, it's no longer equal. Okay, so let's see what happens. Let's go back to the same picture. And down below, I want you to sketch that triangle, but this time, I want you to open that right angle up a little further. So let's say this is still 3 and 4. So just make it a little wider. And this side that was 5 had to get bigger. Let's say we made it 6. Okay, let's see what happens when we try to set up c squared compared to a squared plus b squared. Okay, so I always pick my biggest number first. So 36, oops, I kind of did that mentally. So 6 squared, blank, and then let's just put the other legs over here. So notice we get 36, blank. You could draw a box or a blank, it doesn't matter. 9 plus 16. All right, and so we're looking at, oh, why won't that move down? That's okay. All right, so we get 36 is definitely more than 25. So notice when we had the greater than symbol, this was obtuse. Okay, sorry about that. My pen wasn't charging. So when c squared is more than a squared plus b squared, then this is an obtuse triangle. Okay, so this is kind of leading us into the big picture, which so far I'd like you just to check in with Mr. Crony and a signature on your notes. And that way I know that you've got the 2 warm-up questions and those 2 examples done. Okay? And after that, we'll continue on here. So pause the video here. Okay, so let's summarize everything you just looked at. So basically the big idea is C is always the biggest side. So please write this in your notes. This is like the biggest takeaway of the day. C is always the biggest side. All right, so we're going to use a setup that looks like this for pretty much every problem. So you're going to do c squared, and then you're going to draw a box, and then we're going to do a squared plus b squared. And in this box will go either an equal sign, a less than sign, or a greater than sign. So let's just summarize that down below. So we'll say if c squared equals a squared plus b squared, then you've got a right triangle. Okay, and then the next one, if c squared is greater than a squared plus b squared. Then you've got an obtuse triangle. And then the very last one, if c squared is less than a squared plus b squared, then you've got an acute triangle. So all of our work today is going to focus on making sure this is the biggest side. You always start with the biggest side, okay? And we're going to set that up over there. We're going to square each side, simplify, and we're just going to basically figure out what kind of triangle this is. Okay, so we're going to do less than means one here first. And the first one we're going to look at is the side lengths of 10, 14, and 16. So please call this example 1. We're only going to do 3. Example 1, let's say the sides are, let's go 10, 14, and 16. Okay, so before you get too far ahead of me, yesterday you learned that triangles may or may not exist. So first thing you're going to do, there's two parts to each question now. So I'll call it part A and part B. Part A is, does it exist? Write that down. And then the second question is to classify. And what I mean by that is it acute, right, or obtuse? Okay, so does it exist? And then we're going to classify. All right, so part A, does it exist? You're going to take big plus big and make sure it's larger than, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Sorry about that. You're going to take small plus small and make sure it's more than the big number, the biggest side. So I'm going to take 10 plus 14 and make sure, just put a question mark. We're going to see if that's bigger than 16. And 26 is more than 16. So yes, a triangle exists. Okay, so once a triangle exists, now we can classify it. Here's the thing, guys. If you skip this step, not only will you miss the question, but you're going to try to classify something that can't even be built. Okay, so once you decide that it works, now we do the c squared blank a squared plus b squared. Okay, so c squared is always our biggest, so 16 squared blank, and then we're going to do 10 squared plus 14 squared. So 16 squared is 256, 10 squared is 100, 14 squared is 196, so 256 compared to 296. Just make sure you're starting from the left to the right. So 256 is less than that side. And if you go back to your chart, it's acute. All right, so same process every time. Small plus small is big, and then we do this formula. Okay, let's try the next one. Example 2. All right, you have 16, 30, and 14. 16, 30, and 14. So first thing we want to do is check. Small plus small has to be more than the big. And if it's not, we're done with the problem. We'll just say, nope, you can't, there's no triangle. So looks like these are my two small ones. These are, compare that to my big one. And 30 is not bigger than 30. So no triangle exists. You don't have a triangle. We can't classify it. So the second step doesn't happen here. Okay? Okay, last one. Example 3. That's why we do that first step, because you got to make sure you can build one. Okay, last one's going to require a calculator. So if you don't have a calculator, pause it. Go get one off my desk. So we got 2 radical 3. We got 4 radical 2. and 3 radical 5. Okay, so you don't really know which one's bigger than what until you type this in the calculator. So grab your calculators and just type in the first one, the second one, and the third one. And each time you type it in, you're going to write that number down to 1 decimal place. So the first one is 3.5. The next one is 5.7. And the next one is, oh shoot, I didn't write that one down. Okay, let me grab a calculator. Okay, so I got my calculator and that one was 6.7. Okay, so this is the biggest. All right, so step 1, small plus small should be larger than the big. So 3.5 plus 5.7 has to be larger than 6.7. All right, and if we add this together, we're going to get 9.2 is greater than 6.7. So yes, a triangle exists. Step 1, always, 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 small plus small is more than big. If not, you're done. You don't have to do anymore. Okay, second step, c squared blank, a squared plus b squared. Every time, and just remember c is the biggest one. All right, now here's the kicker. You cannot use the rounded decimals because you're going to end up with wrong answers. Trust me on this process. I'll explain it when I get back. But once you're done with step 1, these numbers are only for step 1. Never, ever, ever use those in the squaring because they're rounded answers and our answers will be off. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, do it exactly like I'm doing here. So use parentheses, 2 radical 3 squared, blank. 4, oh, I'm sorry, not 2 radical 3. We need the big one there. What am I doing? Our big one, let's see, this was our big one, so we're going to put that one first. So 3 radical 5 squared, blank. And then 4 radical 2 squared plus 2 radical 3 squared. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do this with the calculator. And when I get back, I'll show you the shortcut. Okay, so in your calculator, you are going to enter this part right here and that part alone. So type in 3 radical 5. Press enter. Okay, don't clear your calculator. Don't clear it. Just go ahead and type the x squared button and write your answer down. It should be 45 on the money. If it's not exactly 45, I want you to raise your hand and check with Mr. Crony to make sure you typed it in, press enter, and then squared it. Okay, so 45 blank. Do the same thing on the next one. Type in 4 radical 2, press enter, and then square it. And it should be 32, exactly. Okay, next one, 2 radical 3, press enter, and square it. You got to practice typing these in right now or you're not going to know how to put them in. All right, so if you do that one, you should be getting 12. So 45 is definitely, let's see, what does this combine to be? 44. 45 is definitely more than 44. So this would be considered obtuse. Okay, your last step is to get a signature or a check-in. Mr. Crony will kind of document your check-in points to make sure you've got all your notes recorded. Your responsibility is to complete worksheet, what are we on? 9.2, day 2. Okay, and expect a checkpoint tomorrow. So really important to do your homework, really important to check your answers. There, you will be checked on this tomorrow. Okay. All right. Please reach out via email with any questions. I'll be able to check email at night. I can't promise I'll be super speedy at answering during the day, but during the evening I should be able to touch base. So, all right. See you soon.